Hello everyone. Federal Bureau of Investigation is one of the foremost and highly sophisticated investigating agencies in the world. But there is one such case which even FBI was not able to solve it. Yes, today we are going to see the case which FBI itself was not able to solve. This is the case which involved hijacking of an airplane and went unsolved till today. On November 24, 1971, a man carrying a black briefcase approached the flight counter of Northwest Orient Airlines at Portland International Airport. Using cash, the man bought a one-way ticket on Flight 305, a 30-minute trip north to Seattle, Tacoma International Airport. On his ticket, the man listed his name as Dan Cooper. Eyewitnesses described Cooper as a white male in his mid-40s, with dark hair and brown eyes, wearing a black business suit, a white shirt, a thin black tie, a black raincoat, and brown shoes. Carrying a briefcase and a brown paper bag, Cooper boarded Flight 305, a Boeing 727. Cooper took seat 18E in the last row and ordered a drink, a bourbon and 7-Up, from the flight attendant. With 6 crew members and 36 passengers aboard, including the hijacker, Flight 305 left Portland on schedule at 2:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Schaffner, who was sitting in the jump seat at the rear of the plane, directly behind Cooper. Assuming the note was a lonely businessman's phone number, Schaffner dropped the note unopened into her purse. Cooper then leaned toward her and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner opened the note. In neat, all-capital letters printed with a felt-tip pen, Cooper had written, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase and want you to sit by me." Schaffner returned the note to Cooper, sat down as he requested, and quietly asked to see the bomb. He opened his briefcase, and she saw 2 rows of 4 red cylinders, which she assumed was dynamite. Attached to the cylinders were a wire and a large, cylindrical battery, which appeared to resemble a bomb. Cooper closed the briefcase, and told Schaffner his demands. She wrote a note with Cooper's demands, brought it to the cockpit, and informed the flight crew of the situation. Captain Scott directed her to remain in the cockpit for the remainder of the flight, and take notes of events as they unfolded. He then contacted Northwest Flight Operations in Minnesota, and relayed the hijacker's demands. Cooper requests $200,000 in a knapsack by 5 p.m. He wants 2 front parachutes, 2 back parachutes. He wants the money in negotiable American currency. By requesting 2 sets of parachutes, Cooper implied that he planned to take a hostage with him, thereby discouraging authorities from supplying non-functional equipment. During 1970s there were no security checks done on passengers boarding the flight. This is one of the incidents which made the aviation industry to introduce security checks on passengers before boarding the flight. With Schaffner in the cockpit, Flight Attendant Mucklow sat next to Cooper to act as a liaison between him and the flight crew in the cockpit. He then made additional demands. Upon landing in Seattle, the fuel trucks must meet the plane and all passengers must remain seated while she brought the money aboard. He said he would release the passengers after he had the money. The last items brought aboard would be the 4 parachutes. Captain Scott informed Seattle, Tacoma Airport Air Traffic Control of the situation, who contacted local police and the FBI. The passengers were told their arrival in Seattle would be delayed because of a minor mechanical difficulty. Donald Nyrop, the president of Northwest Orient, authorized payment of the ransom and ordered all employees to cooperate with the hijacker and comply with his demands. For approximately 2 hours, Flight 305 circled Puget Sound to give Seattle police and the FBI sufficient time to assemble Cooper's ransom money and parachutes, and to mobilize emergency personnel. During the flight from Portland to Seattle, Cooper demanded that Mucklow remain by his side at all times. She later said that he appeared familiar with the local terrain. While looking out the window, he remarked, "Looks like Tacoma down there," as the aircraft flew above it. He also correctly noted McCord Air Force Base was only a 20-minute drive from Seattle-Tacoma Airport. She later described the hijacker's demeanor. Cooper was not nervous. He seemed rather nice and he was not cruel or nasty. While the plane circled Seattle, Mucklow chatted with Cooper and asked why he picked Northwest Airlines to hijack. He laughed and replied, "It's not because I have a grudge against your airlines, it's just because I have a grudge," then explained that this flight simply suited his needs. He asked where she was from. She answered that she was originally from Pennsylvania, but was living in Minneapolis at the time. Cooper responded that Minnesota was very nice country. She asked where he was from, but he became upset and refused to answer. He asked if she smoked and offered her a cigarette. She replied that she had quit, but accepted the cigarette. The $200,000 ransom was received from Seattle First National Bank in a bag weighing approximately 19 pounds. The money, 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, most of which had serial numbers beginning with L, was photographed on microfilm by the FBI. Seattle police obtained the 2 front parachutes from a local skydiving school and the 2 back parachutes from a local stunt pilot. Around 5:24 Pacific Standard Time, Captain Scott was informed the parachutes had been delivered to the airport, and notified Cooper they would be landing soon. At 5:46 Pacific Standard Time, Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. With Cooper's permission, Scott parked the aircraft on a partially lit runway, away from the main terminal. Cooper demanded that only one representative of the airline approach the plane with the parachutes and money, and the only entrance and exit would be through the aircraft's front door via the mobile air stairs. Northwest Orient Seattle Operations Manager, Al Lee, was designated to be the courier. To avoid the possibility that Cooper might mistake Lee's airline uniform for that of a law enforcement officer, he changed into civilian clothes for the task. With the passengers remaining seated, a ground crew attached the mobile staircase. As per Cooper's directive, Mucklow exited the aircraft through the front door and retrieved the ransom money. When she returned, she carried the money bag past the seated passengers to Cooper in the last row. Cooper then agreed to release the passengers. As they debarked, Cooper inspected the money. In an attempt to break the tension, Mucklow jokingly asked Cooper if she could have some of the money. Cooper readily agreed, and handed her a packet of bills, but she immediately returned the money and explained accepting gratuities was against company policy. She said Cooper had tried to tip her and the other 2 flight attendants earlier in the flight with money from his own pocket, but they had each declined, citing the policy. With the passengers safely debarked, only Cooper and the 6 crew members remained on board. In accordance with Cooper's demands, Mucklow made 3 trips outside the aircraft to retrieve the parachutes, which she brought to him in the rear of the plane. While Mucklow brought aboard the parachutes, Schaffner asked Cooper if she could retrieve her purse, stored in a compartment behind his seat. Cooper agreed and told her, "I won't bite you." Flight attendant Hanokh then asked Cooper if the flight attendants could leave, to which Cooper replied, "Whatever you girls would like." So Hanokh and Schaffner debarked. When Mucklow brought the final parachute to Cooper, she gave him printed instructions for using the parachutes, but Cooper said he didn't need them. A problem with the refueling process caused a delay, so a second truck and then a third were brought to the aircraft to complete the refueling. During the delay, Mucklow said Cooper complained the money was delivered in a cloth bag instead of a knapsack as he had directed, and he now had to improvise a new way to transport the money. Using a pocket knife, Cooper cut the canopy from one of the reserve parachutes, and stuffed some of the money into the empty parachute bag. An FAA official requested a face-to-face meeting with Cooper aboard the aircraft, but Cooper denied the request. Cooper became impatient, saying, "This shouldn't take so long. And, let's get this show on the road." He then gave the cockpit crew his flight plan and directives, a southeast course toward Mexico City at the minimum airspeed possible without stalling the aircraft, approximately 100 knots i.e. 185 kilometers per hour. 115 miles per hour, at a maximum 10,000 foot altitude. Cooper also specified the landing gear must remain deployed, the wing flaps must be lowered 15 degrees, and the cabin must remain unpressurized. First Officer Radizak informed Cooper that this configuration limited the aircraft's range to about 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers, so a second refueling would be necessary before entering Mexico. Cooper and the crew discussed options, and agreed on Reno, Tahoe International Airport as the refueling stop. Cooper further directed the aircraft takeoff with the rear exit door open and its air stair extended. Northwest's Home Office objected that this was unsafe. Cooper countered saying, "It can be done, do it," but did not argue the point and said he would lower the staircase once they were airborne. He demanded Mucklow remain aboard to assist the operation. "This is the crew of Flight 305 upon landing in Reno, left to right, Captain William Scott, co-pilot Bill Radizak, flight attendant Tina Mucklow, flight engineer Harold E. Anderson." Around 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off, with only Cooper, Mucklow, Captain Scott, First Officer Radizak, and Flight Engineer Anderson aboard. Two F-106 fighters from LaCorde Air Force Base and a Lockheed T-33 trainer, diverted from an unrelated Air National Guard mission, followed the 727. All three jets maintained flight patterns to stay behind the slow-moving 727 and out of Cooper's view. After takeoff, Cooper told Mucklow to lower the aft staircase. She told him and the flight crew she feared being sucked out of the aircraft. The flight crew suggested she come to the cockpit and retrieve an emergency rope with which she could tie herself to a seat. Cooper rejected the suggestion, stating he did not want her going up front or the flight crew coming back to the cabin. She continued to express her fear to him, and asked him to cut some cord from one of the parachutes to create a safety line for her. He said he would lower the stairs himself, instructed her to go to the cockpit, close the curtain partition between the coach and first-class sections, and not return. Before she left, Mucklow begged Cooper, "Please, please take the bomb with you." Cooper responded he would either disarm it or take it with him. As she walked to the cockpit and turned to close the curtain partition, she saw Cooper standing in the aisle tying what appeared to be the money bag around his waist. From takeoff to when Mucklow entered the cockpit, 4 to 5 minutes had elapsed. For the rest of the flight to Reno, Mucklow remained in the cockpit and was the last person to see the hijacker. Around 8 p.m., a cockpit warning light flashed, indicating the aft staircase had been deployed. The pilot used the cabin intercom to ask Cooper if he needed assistance, but Cooper's last message was a one-word reply: "No." The cruisers popped from the drop in cabin air pressure from the stairs being opened. At approximately 8:13 p.m., the aircraft's tail section suddenly pitched upward, forcing the pilots to trim and return the aircraft to level flight. In his interview with the FBI, co-pilot Bill Radizak said the sudden upward pitch occurred while the flight was near the suburbs north of Portland. With the aft cabin door open and the staircase deployed, the flight crew remained in the cockpit, unsure if Cooper was still aboard. Mucklow used the cabin intercom to inform Cooper they were approaching Reno, and he needed to raise the stairs so the plane could land safely. She repeated her requests as the pilots made the final approach to land, but neither Mucklow nor the flight crew received a reply from the hijacker. At 11:02 p.m., with the aft staircase still deployed, Flight 305 landed at Reno, Tahoe International Airport. FBI agents, state troopers, sheriff's deputies, and Reno police established a perimeter around the aircraft, but fearing the hijacker and the bomb were still aboard, did not approach the plane. Captain Scott searched the cabin, confirmed Cooper was no longer aboard, and after a 30-minute search, an FBI bomb squad declared the cabin safe. There was intensive investigation done, and around 200 suspects were identified, and short-listed 20 suspects. At end of the investigation, it showed that none of the 20 suspects did this hijack, it seemed like. Cooper did the hijack and jumped out of the plane and vanished with money. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel.